Here's the fastest way for non-US business owners to build US business credit. See, if you're spending more than $15,000 a month on your business, let me ask you something. How does it feel to run a successful business, pay your team on time, while 18-year-old Americans are getting approved automatically? Now, it's not because they had an SSN or were born in America that makes it easier. It's about learning the clear legal system that allows non-US business owners like yourself to secure six-figure credit limits and the best redemptions in the world. See, after helping 500 plus non-US business owners unlock $5.6 million in US credit and getting my own six-figure credit cards, I'm going to show you the fastest way that non-US business owners can follow in order to build US business credit. So let's dive straight in. So there's a lot of non-US business owners out there that have a US corporation, or they learn that they can actually unlock a US corporation, and that by extension unlocks a lot of different financial tools. And in my opinion, there's a lot of misconceptions or a lot of miseducation that people have out there when it comes to business credit in the United States. And I'm gonna break it all down in this video. So pretty much, starting off with the most important thing that you need to know, that business credit is based on this thing called the DUNS number, right? So essentially, the moment that you get a corporation, you can then apply for a number called the DUNS number. So just like how you have a credit score in your home country, might be called the FICO score, a specific type of personal credit score. They usually call it like a specific type of name, right? Usually the FICO score is the typical one in the United States, but pretty much there is a credit bureau that basically manages all of the business credit reports, which essentially means the business credit score, which is Duns and Bradstreet. And basically that means you get this thing called a DUNS number. And just keep in mind that your DUNS number is going to be different from a FICO number. So if you have credit in your home country, that's not connected to this US business credit. So of course you want to build it up so that you can then access good credit limits and all that stuff. And so just as a side note, the FICO score, which is the personal credit score in the United States, if you just have your incorporation, it does not mean that you're building up a FICO score or even building up a DUNS number. The real end goal for building up US business credit is so that you can achieve those business credit cards. And in fact, the quickest way to unlock those credit cards might not necessarily be by actually building up this business credit score. So in fact, we've got a statistic over here. And so according to Duns and Bradstreet, over 80% of business credit decisions still consider your own personal credit. So the moment that you go and apply for a business credit card, certain types of business credit cards with Chase, with Amex, with the big five banks, you're most likely going to have them take a look at your personal credit. And so it's very interesting to see that that DUNS number that you're getting based on your business is actually the secondary factor when it comes for a big five bank to determine your credit application. They're going to take a look at your personal credit before they take a look at your DUNS number. And so it's important, even though you might not even have a DUNS number, they're most likely going to determine your credit applications based on your personal credit. Now, of course, this is me talking to small businesses, the types of businesses that are below $30 million a year. If you're above $30 million a year, then we're talking about making sure your DUNS number is good and it's strong and you've got good net 30 accounts and all these small details. But the types of entrepreneurs that we help usually are within that 5-figure or 6-figure or even 7-figure range of spend every single month. And so at that point, you're not really at the $30 million plus a year mark. And so the typical non-US business owner, the moment that they get their incorporation and those documents, they will then think to, okay, well, open up a business bank account. A big misconception out there is the fact that if you have a business bank account with one of these big five banks, that you're actually building up a business credit score. And that's a huge misconception, especially with these fintech banks. You're not really building anything if you've got these specific types of bank accounts, because in many circumstances, fintech banks and most big five banks are not actually reporting your credit. And so an interesting statistic that comes from DUNS specifically is that most corporate credit cards, which is the type of credit cards that you'll get with Brex, Mercury, and all these fintech banks, according to credit experts, they actually state that less than 30% of corporate credit cards providers actually report to the Business Credit Bureau, right? So that means Duns and Bradstreet, they're not receiving information about your current business credit. And so with this in mind, you might feel like, okay, well, how do I actually build business credit in this circumstance? Because if I was to get a business credit card, they're not even going to report my business credit in many circumstances. And wait, like the business credit is actually the secondary factor that leads yourself as an entrepreneur to actually unlock those business credit cards. So what really matters the most in this whole entire process of building business credit and actually unlocking those business credit cards? So the real unlock happens once you get this thing called the ITIN, or you get yourself an SSN. And the reason why that's so important for a non-US business owner is because if you have a corporation, right, an LLC or a C Corp, whatever, and you don't live in the US and you don't have an SSN or an ITIN, personally, you are not known by the credit bureaus like Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. You have not built up personal credit. And so given the fact that you know now that personal credit actually means much more than business credit, you'd ideally want to build out your personal credit. And that's actually one of the biggest variables that will determine your credit approval odds. And so ideally, once you secure either the ITIN or the SSN, which by the way, if you're a non-US citizen, the IRS created the ITIN for a reason for business owners like you that want to build up personal credit in the United States. So of course you can get that. We've got services on how you can secure your ITIN. Of course, you can check our links in the description. But most importantly, it's important to know that just because you have an ITIN, just because you have an SSN does not mean that you're going to then unlock business credit cards. Of course, you want to build up your personal credit. So that means getting your FICO score, which is essentially the score that reflects your personal credit. You want to get it up to 700 plus, and you want to have at least 1.5 years of personal credit age. Now, that does not mean that you have to wait 1.5 years to actually unlock the business credit cards. You can add things such as backdated trade lines, which is what we do with our clients, which is why we then eventually are able to get our clients very good access to capital, very good credit cards, and certain types of high redemption credit cards in a very quick timeline. And it's because we know when to put certain trade lines on your credit account. Again, I hope not to get too technical because I know that this information does get very complex, but just to make it very straightforward, business credit actually does not mean that much if you're doing less than $30 million a year with your company. So if you're below $30 million a year with your company, and it would be great to secure 6 figures in business credit, you care a lot about the high redemptions, right? So for a lot of our clients, they're able to secure very good personal credit cards and business credit cards that gets them loads of redemptions. How do you actually get to that point? Well, the way to actually build yourself to that point is by focusing mostly on personal credit. So by securing your ITIN, just like what we've done with 500 plus of our clients, you can then eventually build up your personal credit by getting certain low limit credit cards, no annual fee credit cards, building up that score to the point that within the first 3 to 6 months of receiving your ITIN, then you can then go and try to access business credit cards. Now, I just want to make it clear over here, the reason why we talk so much about personal credit on this channel is due to the fact that most business credit cards out there are actually based on this thing called a personal guarantee. And the reason why this is actually so important is because those credit cards are going to be the 6-figure credit cards, the best redemption credit cards, the ones with Chase, the ones with Amex. They're going to check your personal credit before they give you a certain credit card. So in your circumstance, if you don't have an ITIN or any established credit, then you won't even be able to get access to these types of business credit cards. But I'm not here to say that your DUNS number will not mean anything. There are certain types of banks, such as Mercury, that reports your payments to the DUNS number. And of course, that sounds great. That looks like a very important thing that allows you to build up credit, but they're actually reporting to that DUNS number, which is, as we said before, the DUNS number doesn't really mean that much and will not weigh in too much in terms of the odds of you actually getting approved for a good credit card. They will actually be looking at the FICO number, which is attached to your personal credit, which is why you ideally want to be building up personal credit cards, getting personal bank accounts so that you can build up a reputation within the big 5 banks on a personal standpoint so that you can unlock business credit cards. And then once you have business credit cards, then you can look and aim for 7 figures plus, 8 figures plus in business credit. And of course, When you want to get 8 figures or 7 figures plus, that's when they'll actually care much more about the DUNS number. But especially in the very beginning, if you're at 5 figures a month in spend or 6 figures a month in spend, what really matters is your personal credit. So look, I just showed you the full understanding when it comes to building up US business credit as a non-US citizen. The exact sequence, the exact understandings, and the specific misconceptions that come into play when it comes to building up your business credit. But I didn't break down exactly why this process is so difficult to start with. Because once you actually understand the barriers that the US system has put into your way, everything I just taught you will make a lot more sense. That's why I created another video breaking down why it's so hard to build US credit as a non-US citizen. You can watch this video over here. Hopefully you're enjoying the videos on our channel. Make sure to subscribe, give us a like, and I'll see you in the next video.